If you go ahead now and Google deja vu, but you might see, and you see the pictures there, what you would see is an individual looking at a mirror or a painting of some sort. That reflection is being reflected by another mirror, and then that reflection belongs to a different, or is disclosed by a different mirror, and these mirrors are usually squares. Think of it as a square within a square within a square within a square within a square. Each square that is within the other is slightly smaller than the other, so that you can have an internal dimensional extension. And the image of a deja vu is an individual seeing that reflection of themselves within a reflection of themselves being reflected by another reflection of themselves within another reflection of themselves being reflected within another reflection of themselves. And so it just wormholes into this infinite reflection. And this is what happens when you get two mirrors perpendicular to one another, or rather parallel to one another. And you look at one, and then you see behind of it is a reflection of the other mirror, and then you see and it just boomerangs infinitely. And so our understanding of deja vu has this physical demonstration of an infinite internally extended duration of the same thing at a slightly different quantitative measure, meaning its position can be slightly altered, its size, but nevertheless the same exact moment or event is repeated with slightly different coordinated quantitative measures, without losing what the moment is. Deja vu is a feeling that you have experienced, that you have already experienced an event appearing at the present. So you're experiencing an event at the present, and then you get this inclination, or rather intuition, that, man, I feel like I've been here before. I feel like I know this moment. When did I experience this moment that is supposedly new, and that is supposed to be novel, and it's supposed to be this random, unpredictable thing that just so happened, How do I have this feeling that I absolutely am familiar and have at one point at a different period in time experienced this moment? Why do I have this feeling? Why does this feeling even exist if everything is just happening randomly, and then once a thing happens, it never happens again? I mean, evolutionary speaking, if we did adapt everything for some particular purpose, then we have to ask, well, why did we adapt this intuition that we have at one point experienced a moment, and at another point we have this intuition of recollecting that moment at the present? And we think that time is always moving forward and filling this lack of time, or rather void or empty space of time, and things are moving into that, filling the void, filling the space of nullity. That you have a moment, it happened, now it's the past. But you don't know what the future is. I mean, you know what the past is, but you don't know what the future is. Well, that's our assumption, right? Well, the future is whatever happens next. But we don't know what happens next. But the second something happens next, it's no longer the future, it's the past. So the future remains this place of where the moment never is. What the moment is not. It's just the possibility and the necessity that a moment will happen without and irrespective of the nature of its happening. So our assumption of the future is that, well, a moment will necessarily happen irrespective of what the specific nature and specifications of that moment is. Well, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know something's going to happen. You just assumed that thing that will happen exists already, just not at the present. But it exists. Where does it exist? Well, we have a place for it. It's called the future. But that place has no identity that could ascribe to the moment its particular traits. And so we are stuck in this conundrum of time, where we have absolutely certainty of what happened at the past, and we have absolutely no certainty or complete uncertainty of what will happen in the future. And the present is this middle point, or rather mediation, between these two conditions of the universe. But when we describe anything in motion, we always assume that there is an absolute identity of itself extended from the past to the present and towards the future. That it forms a complete whole in order to be a moment in time. What do I mean by that? So if you look at the medical instrument that measures the person's heart rate, like the thing that goes like beep, 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 there's an absolute determined frequency which the abrupt measures of frequencies are moving over or presenting. So for example, when you see somebody, for example, somebody who dies goes like beep, there's a complete straight line, and in that straight line there's a little period that goes along the length of the line. That is measuring that the line is completely extended and determined as itself, as the identity of itself, i.e. a line. But that the period can only be at one place, at one point, at one moment on the line. It's either at the beginning, middle, or the end, or somewhere in between all these factors. And so the line is made by an extended point at every length of space, covering every length or occupying every length in space. But the period can only be at one point at one point at a time, at a particular position. And so our image of the dejavu, where you are facing towards infinite extension of possible alterations of the same moment, then we have the future as this probabilistic model, or rather in philosophy, this potentiality. Things exist as a potentiality when they are not at the present. And this is why you have this sense of, I know this moment, I've been here before. It's because from a pure state of potentiality, you have. Now, which part of you has been at that moment in time? There is, we say, a part of you that could be and a part of you that cannot be at a potential moment in time. The body can't be at a potential moment in time, just like the particle can't be at every length, at every point occupying the entire length of space. It has to be at one point in one position at a time. Your body can only be here or there. It can't be in two places at the same time. But time itself is present at two different places at the same time. I mean, all possible events have to be present in that way. That's why they are the material for the necessary content for anything to come into being. You have to lay out all the possibilities in order for one of them to be conceived. And this is ultimately what logic does. It lays out all the possibilities that can go into a calculus, and it moves on into a mathematical function when the most effective, or the most efficient, or the fastest route is acquired to achieve the solution, or the resolution, or the conclusion. But when it comes to the physical concept of space-time and your place as an individual within it, your mind is this substance that exists simultaneously at different moments or different points at the same time, occupying two different places simultaneously and instantaneously. It is here and there at the same time, but not spatially, because the very nature of spatiality itself goes against the thing being at the same place at two different times. Because space is always inherently discrete. as it belongs as part of an observer's conception of time. The conception of the observer discloses a moment of time, and in that moment of time, there is space. And that space always presents to the observer an inherent limitation in the world. And you can never look out as far as possible beyond the horizon, you see. You can always go as further and further and further out into space. Space is endless, we say. The particular moment you are in is the discrete measure of time in space occupying a particular moment at one point, or rather having a particular position. It can be at two different places at the same time. This is what the limitation of the present presents in our model of space-time. But time generally is this extension of an infinite number of probabilities, or rather potentialities, of all possible things. But because this infinite possibility of all things is related to each and particular finite measure of itself, that being the content and one possibility over another, you versus John. Steve is not John and John is not Steve. By virtue of him being John, he is not Steve. And Steve, by virtue of being Steve, is not John. These are all abrupt measures of this innumerable and infinite set of possibilities. Now, it's infinite because it's indeterminate. The observer, or any particular point that occupy one measure of a possibility, from its particular point of view, cannot apprehend the whole of all possibilities. And therefore, all possibilities presents itself as an inherent limitation to each and every single variable that occupies one measure of possibility, which constitutes the whole of what we call potentiality. What it means for a thing to be a potential. And so you see something come out of the horizon. Oh, well, where did that come from? Well, it came from somewhere. Where did it come from? Well, that's indeterminate.